Okay. Hello, everyone. I think we are live. I'm just setting up a couple additional little things. I had a little snafus you can see with my webcam. I'm on a slightly different webcam than I was thinking of being on, but we are here. And let me just mute this one thing and get the chat message over here so I can see everybody's questions. So welcome to today's live Q&A with a FlexJobs career coach. My name is Brie Reynolds, and I'm the Senior Career Specialist at FlexJobs. And today we're going to be doing just a live 30-minute call where I'm going to answer your questions. So if you do have questions, you can put them into the chat area when you're looking at the YouTube live stream. And we'll try to get to as many of those as we can over the next 30 minutes or so. And if you see me going back and forth, I've got a couple screens set up here so I can see your questions and I can see the actual camera, so we can go back and forth and have our conversation. So it looks like we already have some questions coming in, which is great. I do want to do one quick thing where I am going to see if I can share my screen here. And let's just see. Looks like, nope, I'm just going to cancel that. All right, we're going to skip that part. It looks like we're having some technical difficulties sharing the screen. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. New technology, always fun, even when you practice. So let's see, let's get to some questions for today's chat. So the first question is coming in from, let's see, the very first question is 123 Poker Dude. Are there remote jobs for people with little experience? And also, are there computer-based jobs like data entry for people with little work experience? Okay, so I'll give you a little overview of the remote job market and what we're seeing in terms of the types of jobs that are being offered. So we actually see a really wide variety. And yes, there are jobs for people who don't have a lot of work experience, who might be more entry level. We see remote jobs listed at entry level, experienced level, managerial level, and senior level positions. And so that's really important to know, is that there are lots of different opportunities out there for everybody, depending on where your career level is. We do see the most opportunities in the experienced, which is, if you have a few years of experience in a career field, and the managerial level. But that's really more of the overall job market's makeup, is just that there are more jobs in those levels than there are at entry level or senior level. But yeah, so there are some remote jobs with that require little to no experience. And there are definitely more than just computer related jobs like IT and computer software development and things like that. There are definitely other types of jobs out there. So the top fields that we see for remote work are things like, let me just get my list up in front of me here. Computer and IT is, of course, one of the big ones. I don't want to discount that there aren't remote jobs for that field, but we also see remote jobs in medical and health and sales, education and training, customer service, and accounting and finance. HR and recruiting is also a big one, so human resources and recruiting. And when I say we see this, it's based on the job posting data that we see at FlexJobs, and that's for over 55 career fields. So those are some of the top fields that we see. And we do see entry-level positions in all of those areas. So depending on what you have in terms of skills or abilities or interests, you might take a look at all of those different things and see what types of jobs line up. And you can search by entry level, which makes it really easy to pinpoint those types of jobs that don't require a lot of experience that you might be eligible for. Okay, let's jump on to question number 2, which comes from Lila. Does it make a difference in hiring chances if you apply via FlexJobs or via the company's website? Great question. So Lila's asking this about what if you're using FlexJobs to job search, should you apply on FlexJobs or can you apply on the company website, and does that make any difference? It depends. So we do have some employers who post to FlexJobs and they will expect to see job applications through FlexJobs because that's where they're posting those jobs, and some of them post exclusively to us. But for the most part, we do have employers who will accept your applications either through FlexJobs or through the employer's website. And what we do when we post the jobs on FlexJobs is we will list the fastest and best way to apply for that job. So whether it's through the company's website or through FlexJobs, if they have requested that, whatever you see when you click that how to apply, or excuse me, apply now button, when you're looking at a job posting at FlexJobs, that's the best way to apply. So that's hopefully a good quick tip there. And let's see. Okay, so this is a great question. I think this probably applies to a lot of people. I know when I work with job seekers, this comes up a lot. So the question is that I've applied for quite a few jobs over the last 2 years without getting a single interview. What's so different in remote jobs? What do employers look for in a remote resume? Okay, so there's a few key differences. I will say overall, the tips that I give you for remote resumes could apply to your overall job search, but these are definitely good to use for remote applications. So the first thing is, if you have previous remote experience, that is something that should definitely be on your resume. So that's one of the biggest things that we look for when we're coaching clients, is if they say they have previous remote experience, we want to actually see that listed out on the resume. So it might be something like, remote work experience right next to the job title, or just remote work next to the job title when you're listing different jobs on your resume. Up in the summary of the qualifications that you have at the top of your resume, it might be listed there. So you could say experience working remotely, or you could even say something like 2 years experience working remotely if you have a specific amount of time. The other things that you can do, so if you have remote work experience, that's what you want to do, is actually literally say it on your resume. If you don't have remote work experience, but you do have some key skills that make you a great remote worker, you have to make sure those skills are really incorporated throughout your resume. And you can even have a line in your summary that might say something like top skills for remote work, or excellent remote work friendly skills, something like that, and then list those particular skills. So the things that I'm talking about are things like written and verbal communication. So communicating both in writing when you're using either chat or email or something like that. A lot of that happens in a remote environment. But like I said, in traditional office environments, that's more the case now too, that you're communicating over email or chat. So that's important to think about. The other thing is verbal communication, as I stumble over trying to think of what that was, but being able to communicate with people both on video conferencing, but also phone calls or web conferences. Anytime where you're actually talking to people, you need to have excellent verbal communication skills as well. And the reason is that in a remote environment, that's the main way that you're connecting with people. There's not a lot of in-person, face-to-face interaction where you're getting a lot of body language. So that written and verbal communication is really the basis, the foundation of how you communicate. So those are some things to put on your resume. Also, task and time management, really being able to keep yourself on task, having the ability to focus. Those are really big. Growth mindset is a big one, where you demonstrate that you're always learning new things, that you're always looking for ways to improve or to learn something that would be useful for your jobs. You can actually write out the courses that you've taken, if you've taken anything recently, or just the ways that you learn more, conferences that you've attended or trainings that you've done online, whatever it might be. But always looking for ways to learn. That's another good skill to have for remote jobs. I would also highly recommend having a technology skills section on your resume. And when I say this, sometimes people say, well, everybody knows Microsoft Word and everybody knows Google Drive, but that's not the case. A lot of people don't know those things. And so it's important to let the employer know that you understand the technology that they use to communicate with their remote workers. So you might find some clues for that either on the company's website or in their job description. They might actually list some of the key technology programs that you need to know. But if you can't find anything like that, you can at least write down the communication and collaboration tools that you know. So things like Google Drive or Dropbox for document collaboration. Things like Zoom or GoToWebinar or Google Hangouts or things like that for web conferencing and video conferencing. And instant messenger programs, so things that allow you to do online chat, Slack, Google Chat, those types of things. The nice thing about all of these programs is that if you're not really familiar with them, they usually offer free versions. So you can go out and actually learn all of the different things that you might need to know, become familiar with those programs, and then you can add them to your resume. So really you're thinking about how does a remote company communicate, how do they collaborate, and making sure that those programs, those apps and things that they use are listed on your resume. Okay, so I know that was kind of a long-winded answer, but those are a few big things that you can do for your resume. But here is my last thing about resumes, unless people have other questions. My biggest tip is that you really have to customize your resume for every job application. And it seems like it's a lot of extra work. Once you actually start to do it and really dial in your process for it, hopefully it won't take too much longer to actually do that. But it is really important because your resume is going to be scanned by a computer, most likely before it actually gets to a human, and that computer is looking at keywords. They're looking at the job listings keywords, and then they're looking at your resume, and they're trying to find connections. And even when we read or scan a resume as a human being, we're doing the same thing. We're looking for those key things that we want to know about this candidate. So by updating your resume for each job, by including those keywords, making sure that they are throughout your resume, but especially in that summary and key skills section at the top, that's a really good place to do that. You're helping both the computer and the human reader better understand your qualifications and connect you to the job immediately. So take that extra time. We have a lot of articles on the FlexJobs blog about tailoring and editing your resumes and cover letters for each job. I definitely recommend that. Okay, so we have lots of questions coming in. All right. Do you recommend tailoring? Oh, see, I picked the one that's exactly what I just talked about. Do you recommend tailoring your resume for each job application? Yes, I absolutely do. Okay, are there remote jobs for looking for people who are have 4 to 6 years work experience? My resume has matched the descriptions, but I'm still not getting called for interviews. Okay, so let's talk about that. The next step in the process of, you have tailored your resumes, you feel like those keywords are matching up. What I would definitely recommend is to do either a scan of your resume, and you can use, I think it's JobScan is one of the websites that will do this. I believe they offer free scans where you can actually upload the job description and upload your resume and see how often you are getting connected to the keywords in the job description on your resume. It'll actually compare the two documents and give you a score. So it might say you're 67% matched or you're 80% matched, and you'll be able to figure out if you're really making those connections. Because I myself have experienced this, and also when I'm working with clients, that you feel like you are making the connection. You've got those similar keywords in there, but then you put it into a system like that and you realize, oh, I'm not actually making that connection as many times as I thought I was. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is do on a PC, it's a Control F or a Control H command when you're in Word, but it's essentially trying to find keywords, Control F, find. And so you click Control 8 or Control F, and then you can type in the keyword that you want to be in your resume a lot. And so let's say financial analyst happens to be one of them. So you can search your resume to see how many times financial analyst, or you might search for financial analysis, comes up in your resume, and you can actually be told it comes up 3 times or 5 times or 0 times. I actually had a client I was working with this week who was going for a particular type of job, but that job title or that keyword did not appear on her resume 1 time. So that is gonna not work. So that's something you can do, is actually do an evaluation of your document to see if you are matching. And then outside of actually tweaking your resume, there's a lot of other stuff you can do as a job seeker. So I would recommend looking up the company on a website like LinkedIn, where you can see if you know anyone at that company, and reaching out and doing that as an additional step when you're applying for the job, reaching out to anybody that you might know at that company. And I would pick maybe one person, not everybody that you know, but reaching out to them and say, hey, I'm interested in applying for this job, and do you have any tips, or what's your experience been like working with this company, and making a connection with somebody at the company, because they might be willing to actually submit your resume for you, which can go a long way to getting you to the top of the pile to be reviewed. That's a key piece of networking. I know a lot of times you probably hear from career coaches, and I talk about this a lot, is networking is a big piece of your job search. And so that's one step you can do, is not just apply, but when you are applying, look for any connections that you have to that company, and try to reconnect with those people and let them know that you're applying, and hopefully they will want to help you out and maybe submit your resume in addition to applying online, because you usually have to do both of those things. So that's another thing that you can do, is really evaluate those pieces. Are you doing other things in your job search, like networking, like seeing who you're connected to at the company, in addition to actually applying online? Because that's one piece of it, but the more you can build out your job search and do these other steps, especially the networking piece and really connecting with people at that company, the better. Okay, so let me go through here. I want to make sure I'm not skipping too many of these. Sometimes I scroll a little too far. Okay, is it harder for an older career transitioner to find a remote job? I'm looking for entry-level work in a field that is related but not the same as my earlier career, and I'm not having any luck. This is a great question. I talk to a lot of people who are in career transition at all stages of your career. So some people who have kind of just started out and they realize that what they're doing isn't what they want to do ultimately. And also people who've done different jobs or the same job for 20 or 30 years, and now they're looking for a change. So it's not necessarily harder for a career transitioner to find a remote job, but there are definitely difficult parts about the job search in general that are also applicable in the remote job search. So concerns about ageism are very real. It's an unfortunate part of the job search process, but it does happen. And that's one of the bigger things, especially when you're transitioning, is that if you have a lot of work experience, you are an older job seeker, and you're transitioning to a new career field, it's sort of a doubly difficult thing to do. That doesn't mean it's impossible, but it means that you do have to pay attention to some specific things. So here's the short version of what I would recommend. One of the biggest things that you have to do is really just pay attention to how you're coming across, because you may be really confident that you can do the work, that you can learn new skills. You have to make sure that you're demonstrating that, because those are kind of the concerns that employers have when they are thinking about hiring an older worker or somebody who's transitioning from another career is, can they actually do this job? It seems different than what they were doing before. Can they learn the important skills, the computer programs, the technology, those sorts of things that it takes to do the job? And usually wrongfully, they assume that if you have reached a certain age or a certain level of your career, you're not going to be able to make that shift or transition as easily. So what you need to do is anticipate that fear or that concern and try to address it beforehand. So in your cover letter, in your resume, talk about your growth mindset, your willingness to learn new things. What are some of the last things that you've learned? How are you teaching yourself? How are you training for this new field? The technology skills section on your resume comes in really handy here. You want to show that you are really current with programs. And also just the design of your resume, how you're presenting yourself on LinkedIn and in your resume and things like that, all of it is especially important. It's important for all job seekers, but when you're trying to overcome these really unfortunate bias hurdles, it becomes especially important to really pay attention to how you're presenting yourself. And what you want to do is present yourself as somebody who is quick to learn new things, who is regularly self-teaching, teaching yourself new things, and who understands what it takes to do the work in this new field. And you really have to translate your old experience or your previous experience to what this new experience takes. So on your resume, in the job descriptions, in the summary, you have to do that heavy lifting for the employer, because they're not going to spend a lot of time doing it for you. So keywords and things like that are really important. The way you describe your old work, you want to somehow transition that to show the skills that you've learned, those transferable skills that apply to your new work, really demonstrate those in your older job descriptions. So that's really important too. So hopefully some of those tips were helpful. Okay, let's see. I have been applying to jobs on FlexJobs for almost 6 months now and have yet to land a remote job. Why are they so hard to obtain? And hello from the greater Boston area. I know this person said hello from Kansas City, so I'll say hi from Boston. So this is a common question. Job searching is definitely an art. It is not a science, and there are a lot of things that you can do to make sure that you are making the most of your job search, but it's still really difficult to anticipate how long a job search might take. It depends on the level of career, the type of work that you're going into, how much experience you bring to the table, and then also the quality of your job search materials. Are you really tailoring the resume and cover letter every single time? When you apply, are you trying to make the most of your network and finding connections at that company? Those are all things you can control. And then as a job seeker, sometimes it's helpful to think about the things that are a little bit outside of your control, because it shows you that, yes, you are doing the best you can. There are some things that are just not in your control as a job seeker, and those are also going to have an impact on how long it takes. So it's not all just you. I guess that's the point that I want to get across. It's not all just you not doing all the right things. There are other forces in a job search. So they may be hiring internally, and they've put out the job listing just to see if there are any candidates that absolutely blow them away, but they're really pretty settled on somebody who's internal. They may have put out the job listing prematurely and then decided maybe we really don't want to hire for this, or somebody who is integral to the hiring experience is not available. It's vacation season especially. I know you've said you've been searching for most of this year, but as we hit the summer months, that's something to keep in mind too, is that hiring comes in fits and spurts during the summer. You know, they start the hiring process, but then people go on vacation, so they kind of have to put things on pause. There's all of those types of things that you cannot control. So the really important thing is to just control what you can in the job search, the quality of your materials, your networking level, also trying to make connections at companies that maybe don't have job listings available yet. So one of the things you can do on FlexJobs is company research. Excuse my elbow bang on my desk there. But you can do company research where you look into companies that have jobs in certain career fields. You can see their job posting history. Maybe they don't have anything listed right now, but you might be able to reach out to that company and have a prospecting email, which is basically where you say, hey, I'm really interested in your company. I like the work that you're doing. Or, you know, I think your mission is great. I feel like I'd be a really good fit. If something were to become available in this type of job or in this department, I would be really interested in you letting me know about that and keeping me in mind for that type of work. So that's really important to include in your search if you feel like you're not getting anywhere, is also reaching out to companies that maybe aren't actively hiring at the moment, because they might find it easier to say, oh, we would like to hire this person. And we are, you know, looking in that field. We just hadn't put anything out there yet. So that's something too, is prospecting emails. So those are just some of the things to think about if you are not finding success. One big thing I will say is that on the FlexJobs blog, if you search for checklist, so there's resume checklist, cover letter checklist, interview checklist, we have blog posts that detail a long list of things that we recommend you do for each of those pieces of your job search, so you can get hopefully a good sense if you're missing anything. And at least for some people, it reassures you that you're doing all the right things and you just have to keep kind of plugging at it. And for some people, they'll realize, oh, I was missing doing this specific thing. So I'm going to incorporate that into my job search. So if you go to the FlexJobs blog, it's flexjobs.com/blog, you'll be able to find those checklists. Okay, so I know time is running out. We have about 8 minutes left. I'm going to keep on plugging along with questions. Let's see. Oh, I'd like to job with the option for remote, not solely remote. Any tips on looking for those opportunities? That's a really good question. And to be honest, I don't think I've ever been asked that before. Most of the people that we talk to want a fully remote job, but there are definitely opportunities out there, and a lot of opportunities for partially or occasional remote work. Partially remote work where you're in the office sometimes, you're at home other times, and sometimes you might be visiting with clients and working from home other times, or things like that. So that's really important to keep in mind. So on the FlexJobs site itself, you can go to the advanced search page, and it will actually allow you to search by level of remote work. So you can search for, I think it's the option for remote work, partial remote work, and then fully remote work, I believe, are the three options. I might be missing one in there, but anyway, you'll see the level for remote work and you can select that. That's also really helpful if you're looking for a 100% remote job where you're never in the office. You can select that level for yourself. So yes, there are definitely those jobs out there. I would also pay attention if you're searching on any job search website, or you're on a company website, something like that. Sometimes you'll see clues that they are flexible, but they don't actually say this is a remote job or this has the option for remote. But you might see something related to work-life balance, or things like flexible hours or flexible scheduling or flexible work options. So any clues like that, you might go ahead and apply for the job if you're interested in it. And then in the interview process, you could ask about remote work also, especially if you're looking for occasional remote work. That's something that you're more likely able to negotiate as part of the job interview and job offer process than a fully remote position. Trying to turn one that isn't remote into fully remote is very difficult, but you could, negotiate the option for a day or two remote. So that's something to look for too. Okay, so actually one person here is asking about FlexJobs coaching options. So yes, we do offer career coaching at FlexJobs. We have a couple different options. There is a straight career coaching session, which is a 30-minute session one-on-one with one of our coaches. It's me and two other wonderful coaches that are on the coaching team. And so that is a 30-minute session. And then we also do a resume review and rewrite option where there's no session involved with that, but you would submit your resume, you'd fill out an intake form, and then we would transform your document. And especially if you're looking for remote work, we pay special attention to making sure your resume is appropriate for remote jobs. And then we have a bundle where it's those two things combined. So it would be a career coaching session and a resume review. You can find all that information on FlexJobs.com. It's only available for FlexJobs members. It's deeply discounted career coaching because we want our members to have that option. So that's something to keep in mind also. Oh, good question about resumes. How important is it to keep your resume to 1 page? I've heard, I have a hard time keeping mine under 2 pages. Okay, so good news for probably most of the people on the chat is that if your resume is 2 pages, it is probably okay if you have more than a few years of experience. If you're kind of just starting out in your career, or you are changing career fields and you can eliminate some of your previous work experience that's really not at all related to what you're going for now, 1 page is probably ideal. But after you get past that few years of experience, you've got some good experience under your belt. I know it used to be the rule was like 5+ years of experience, you can have a 2-page resume. It's something around there, 5, 7 years. It depends on the amount of work you've been doing, the details that you want to offer for those jobs, and how much of it is applicable to the type of work that you're going for. But yes, typically after about 5 to 7 years of experience, a 2-page resume is okay. Now, you can go to 1.5 pages. It doesn't have to be a full 2 pages. And if you feel like filling 2 pages is too much, I would recommend not trying to stretch it. You don't want to just make it look like you're adding information for the heck of it. You want to have only the most applicable information on your resume. So 1.5 pages is fine. I know some people feel a little bit funny about not filling that 2nd page. That's okay. But 2 pages is okay as long as you're not sort of an entry level or starting out pretty new into your career. If you have a few years of experience and some good things to say, then two pages is okay. Let's see, question. Am I supposed to use my in-person position as a comparison for salary? Okay, let's talk about remote jobs and pay, because this is a big question that we get. So the general tip is that remote jobs do not really pay differently than in-person jobs. We've compared a lot of the remote jobs that we see on FlexJobs to the salary ranges for those types of positions in general, and they're very similar. They're either a little bit more, they pay a little bit more, or they pay a little bit less, but the average is always pretty much the same. So for example, if I were comparing an HR generalist role that's a remote job versus an HR generalist role that is an in-person job, they're likely to have similar salaries. The difference in salary typically comes from how the salary is set based on location. So in an in-office position, the location of that worker at the city that they're in typically, or the state, is used to determine what that salary is, because there's a local job market that sets a certain rate, essentially. There's the market rate for that position. And the market rate for a city like New York City is going to be very different than the market rate for a place like Louisville, Kentucky. So it is really important to know the difference between where you're located and what that salary range is. Know the salary range for where the company is located, and then you'll have this wider band of a salary range where you can compare and really understand the potential for salary for that particular position, because you'll do it by your location and by the company's location. You could also look at the national average, because that's usually how remote salaries are set, is in one of those 3 ways, either by your location, by the company's location, or by just a national average. And we get that information from actually asking remote companies how they set their salaries. You could use a site like salary.com or payscale.com to set those types of salaries, or to, excuse me, not set the types of salaries. It'd be nice if you could just set your salary, but to look up the rates for your particular position that you're going for, and it'll give you ranges. And you can do it by location, by career level. There's lots of different details that you can get into when you're looking up your different jobs. But those are 2 good websites to get those ranges. And again, look up based on your location, the company's location, and the nationwide average to get the best range of possibility for your salary. I hope that helps, because it is a little bit different than in-office jobs. There are multiple locations you could be looking at. Let's see, another question is, should you add references to your resume or wait till the company asks for them? So it used to be that you would have either references on your resume, or you would have references available by request at the end of the resume, but companies are going to request the references whenever they want them. So you don't have to have that on your resume anymore, and you don't have to use that space to have references available upon request or something like that on your resume. You can leave it off. I would have them ready to go. So I would have a little list that you keep in your own document. And when you're asked for that by the company, then you have a quick way to copy and paste that right in an email and send it off to them, or upload it into their system, whatever they are asking for. Okay, let's see. Oh, what about, okay, so this is a good question. What about when you have 20 years of experience and work in a technical field? It's not possible to squeeze everything into 2 pages. So yes, that is very true. Your entire career history, or even the most applicable career history, might not fit onto 2 pages. What we typically recommend is focusing, especially if your more recent experience is highly applicable, focus on the last 10 to 15 years of your work experience for your resume. So if you have 20 years of experience, you might be able to eliminate some of that older experience and just focus on the last 10 to 15 years. Now, what you could do is have just a little bit of a list that says additional experience, and then maybe list the company names and the job titles for your previous experience, but doesn't go into too much detail about what you did at those places, because hopefully that is reflected in your more recent experience. Or if that information is not going to be applicable to whatever you're going for now, you can just leave it off. Your LinkedIn profile is a good place to have your full experience if you really want it out there, but it is usually not necessary. Really, that last 10 to 15 years experience, maybe 20 years if you are, if it's all highly applicable, is what you would want on your resume. The key thing I would think to know is that it's really important to be selective about what you're putting on your resume and make sure it is highly applicable to the jobs that you're going for now. You can always talk about something that is not on your resume. So if you're in a job interview or even in your cover letter or wherever else, you can talk about things that aren't on your resume and say, oh, you know, what's not on my resume is this one experience I had where I have these skills and all that. But you don't have to list every single thing on your resume. So I would list only the absolute most applicable things. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so it looks like we are actually past that 30 minutes. I'm gonna look for one more question. And oh, and actually there's some good advice here. Don't forget to build a great LinkedIn profile so they can see your written recommendations and use them as references. It saves them the trouble of calling for the references or having to call them. Yes, great. Thank you, Alan. Great suggestion there. On your LinkedIn profile, you can ask people for references so they can actually review you and say what a great employee or coworker you were and how they enjoyed working with you. You can also offer those to other people. So that's often what I recommend, is that if you write a recommendation for somebody else on LinkedIn, it will then say, hey, you know, Brie wrote you a recommendation. Do you want to recommend Brie? And it'll kind of prompt them to do the same thing. So that's a nice way to give that back and forth. Say, hey, I'd love to write a recommendation for you. Would you also be willing to write one for me? But having those on your LinkedIn profile is great. And it also shows people right off the bat that you are a trusted coworker or that you've done some good work. So good idea. And let's see, I'm going to do one more question and then we will call it a day. I could go on and on. Do remote jobs hold an employment gap against you just as much as the on-site jobs? So yes, we do talk to a lot of people who are coming back into the workforce who have some kind of gap on their resume for any sort of reason. We have parents who are returning. We have people who were laid off. We have people who decided to take a career break and just figure out what they wanted to do. People who had taken a break to do some testing and get certified in different things, but hadn't actually been working during that time. Lots of different reasons, health reasons for sure. So gaps are more common on resumes, I think, than before. Also, just the nature of how we work has changed a lot. So there's not that linear career field where you start out in one company and you finish with one company. So that gap is more common as we change jobs more often over the course of a lifetime. So yes, it is similar as a problem, quote unquote problem, for remote jobs as it is for in-office jobs. But there are a lot of different ways that you can overcome that gap. We have a ton of articles about that on the FlexJobs blog. So I think that's where I'll point you since we're running out of time a little bit. But that's a great place to look for those as well. So thank you all very much for the great questions. I'm so sorry. I know there's a lot that I wasn't able to get to, but hopefully everybody learned a thing or two here today. And thank you for spending some time with us. You can learn more about remote and flexible job searching at flexjobs.com. And you can also subscribe to the YouTube channel here for more of these videos. We do employer webinars where we're actually talking to employers who are hiring and you can get the inside scoop. And we also do job search advice webinars and videos and things like this. So check out the FlexJobs YouTube channel as well for more great tips. Thank you all very much. And I wish you the best of luck in your remote job search. Have a good day.